Good morning, and thank you for coming for the screening of The Wizard of Oz. The film is part of our Festival of Preservation. It's a fantastic restoration. If you haven't seen this on a big screen in a while, it's like it's magic what Warner Brothers did with the restoration. And to introduce the film, I invited long distance another filmmaker, Alexandre Philippe. He's made a movie which we will be showing in Sag Harbor in 2023 called Lynch Oz, and it's on the relationship between The Wizard of Oz and David Lynch, was famously in love with this movie. And so I thought Alexander could join us and talk a little bit about the mystique of The Wizard of Oz, and then we'll play the film. Alexandre Philippe. Oh, here he is. Good morning,
Hello.
Alexander. Thank you for waking up. It's in California, so it's 7 o'clock there. And Alexander, we have a big room full of kids and adults as well to see this movie. Can you tell a little bit about what is so important about The Wizard of Oz and why it's such an endless source of fascination?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I think it's wonderful to. I can't see the audience, but it's wonderful to hear that there are so many people, especially kids, who I hope will get to discover The Wizard of Oz for the very first time on the big screen, which is something I never got to do, unfortunately. I grew up in Switzerland, so for me, The Wizard of Oz is a slightly different story. I wasn't raised on The Wizard of Oz the way that most American audiences have been raised on The Wizard of Oz. I wasn't. I didn't get that experience until I actually got to discover it in my early 20s, and it was an absolute revelation for me. But The Wizard of Oz is so interesting on so many different levels. It obviously came out in 1939, and it wasn't a huge hit. It was made for just under $3 million at the time, which back then was a lot of money. And it took about 10 years for the movie to essentially break even. But it wasn't until 1956, when the film was essentially televised, that it became this extraordinary hit. About 45 million people tuned in at the time. And then it became this holiday tradition. And it's a film that has stayed, I think, with Americans now. Every year it is still this tradition. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's a film, I think, that embodies the American dream, this idea that we all possess the things within us that are capable of making us great, of making us achieve the things that we aspire to, this idea of leaving home, of going over the rainbow, of conquering one's demons, and then safely coming back home. Those are very powerful ideas that I think resonated back in the day and continue to resonate now.
And you've explored the relationship between The Wizard of Oz and one particular filmmaker in your last film. And it's not an immediate association, but it's true that Lynch is actually obsessed by the film.
I mean, you can certainly make that argument. In fact, I was very fortunate. Just about not even a week ago, I got to screen the film on Coronado Island, where L. Frank Baum wrote the sequel to The Wizard of Oz. It's just south of San Diego, and David Lynch's sister also lives there, and she came to introduce me and watch the film. And we talked about David Lynch's relationship to The Wizard of Oz after the screening, and she told me that. Obviously he's, she didn't use the word obsessed, but she certainly, he's very, very, very fond of the movie The Wizard of Oz. And you can certainly see that in his cinema. But, he's certainly not the only filmmaker. There was this incredible study made in Italy, in Torino at the university, that basically deemed The Wizard of Oz the most influential film of all time. Joel Cohen actually at one point said, that every film ever made is an attempt to remake The Wizard of Oz, it's hyperbole, certainly, but you can see that, I think, very much so in American cinema, probably more so in American cinema than in international cinema. But so many, film directors have been influenced, continue to be influenced. John Waters, who's in Lynch Oz also, I think you can look back at a lot of his films and there's so many references, conscious and unconscious. And I think that's what makes, Lynch so interesting, is that a lot of the references or ideas that he has in his films are not necessarily conscious references. Wild at Heart, clearly very conscious. The characters in the film have seen The Wizard of Oz. They reference The Wizard of Oz. but you can look at his entire filmography and the DNA, the sort of the language of Oz is pretty much embedded in his cinema.
Well, thank you, Alexander. And we hope we'll have you in person when we show the documentary in 2020, your film in 2023. And enjoy The Wizard of Oz, and please thank him.
Thank you so much.